Hello and welcome to Bespoke Unit. I'm CP and in this video I'm reviewing Martini Rosso. As per usual, this review is conducted using the Bespoke Unit Liquor Formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can either use at home for your own drinks, or if you don't have the time to watch the entirety of this video, just look in the description below where you'll find the full written review and this very PDF, which will give you a quick overview of the drink and its characteristics. Released way back in 1863, Martini and Rossi Rosso claims to be one of the oldest vermouths on the market. However, there is also Carpano Antica, which is said to use a recipe from 1786, so it does also have a claim to that title. Nevertheless, we're not going to get involved in that debate. We're going to talk about the drink and we're going to review it ourselves. It is still produced at the Martini and Rossi Distilleria Nazionale di Spirito di Vino in Turin or Torino in Italy. As I said, it is a variety of vermouth and you can learn all about vermouth in our full guide, which is in the description below, which will also give you our top 10 favorites. Like all vermouth, its base is basically red wine and it's taken on this slightly ambery colour thanks to the use of natural caramel. It also includes botanicals and it's said to have 50 plus herbs and spices. Indeed, the recipe has been passed down from generation to generation for the people who are producing it, and it's a top secret recipe at that. There's no age statement, although it is supposedly stored in oak casks during the steeping process, and you're looking at an alcohol by volume of 14.4%. With that all being said, let's jump into the actual robe. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a slightly dark amber hue. It's got nice clarity, although there is a little bit of haziness, probably brought on by the use of all the botanicals and the caramel in there. And it has nice viscosity. It's quite syrupy, it's quite thick to look at. It does have nice scallops when you swirl it in your glass. Moving on to the nose. So I'm quite glad I let this warm up a little bit before doing the video because I had it in the fridge. And yes, indeed, it is best served slightly chilled, but the colder it is, the less flavor you're going to get, the fewer aromas. You really need to let it warm up to about 8 degrees Celsius, which then is going to evaporate and give you some of its properties. So what I've written down as aromas here is mostly dried fruit, but specifically there's a bit of raisin and there's a bit of date. You also have agarwood being a resin, also known as oud, which is used in perfumery and is often associated with Oriental perfumery. It has an aroma that you could liken to tobacco. There's a slight touch of vanilla, leather. It's quite musky, and indeed that is very much evocative in Martini Rosso's nose. And then there's a hint of bay leaf, which is just the slight whiff of those aromatics that you get in the nose itself. That now done, let's take a sip. Overall, a sweet primary flavour. However, it does take you on a journey. You start off quite sweet, and then as it progresses, it gets gradually bitterer and bitterer. Do you say more bitter or bitterer? It gets bitterer. Let's say bitterer. And the mouthfeel is oily, it's smooth, and it envelops the palate. It gets everywhere, but in a pleasant way. And then towards the end, it slowly becomes a bit drying, a bit eucalyptic. In its opening, you can expect almost like a Medina vinegar flavour. And Medina vinegar, not just your regular vinegar that you put on chips if you're in the UK, but Medina vinegar, which is sweet, succulent, and very thick. There's an element of honey, some raisin, and some caramel. As mentioned earlier, this does indeed contain some natural caramel. However, as you get into the heart of the flavour profile, you start to encounter some of these spices, and it first gives you a glimpse of anise, then you get some cola nut. Now, cola nut you probably associate with Coca-Cola, and you wouldn't be wrong, but cola nut in its raw form is going to have a more bitter quality. Indeed, it does have some of the flavour of Coca-Cola, but it is not quite as sweet. It is quite bitter. And then there's a hint of nutmeg. However, you could probably also argue that there is you know, cola is in the drink Coca-Cola, because right now it's still more on the sweet side, even if we do have an element of bitterness. It's not until the finish comes across, and as it's starting to evaporate off the palate, you get a big dose of quinine, which is a bitter, or it's also known as quinoa. It's a bark root that is used to fight malaria, and hence hydrochloroquine. It's still used today, although that is a synthetic version. But you're still going to get this bitterness from that flavor, a hint of pepper, just a sprinkle, and then some woodiness from the oak. And that's also when the red wine element, the more vinous characteristics start to reveal some tannins too. As for its overall complexity, well, I gave you quite a depiction there. I hope I covered it quite well. And indeed, there is a nice variety of complexity from this nice, cheap little drink. It does take you on a voyage, and while it might not be as complex as something like Cinzano or Carpano Antica, it's still going to give you a lovely experience from start to finish. Its flavor isn't as rich or as intense as you might expect. Indeed, it is often regarded as one of the milder vermouths, so it can easily get overpowered when used in a cocktail. So take care in perhaps using a higher dose of Rosso, or indeed using a different vermouth which is stronger if you're looking for a big, flavoursome vermouth. And in terms of harmony, you do get some good balance. It does stimulate the variety of the palate, doesn't cause any excessive salivation or dryness. In fact, you do have both that play a role at different times. And then in terms of length, this has kind of got a medium, moderate length to it. It doesn't last for very long on the palate. You may get some of the quinine that's going to stay for a while, but the sweetness dissipates very quickly. This leads me on to the overall experience. So first of all, taking a look at the bottle and the label. It's very iconic, this pressed glass with the date of its release, the branding, and on the back as well. It's stylish, and it really kind of embodies the Dolce Vita concept that was invented in the 50s and 60s. The bottle has had some redesigns, so there's been changes of colors of the stickers. This white is quite nice, and it does contrast nicely off the almost black color of the liquid inside the green bottle. There is no packaging, it just comes like this, and this is the smaller 50 centiliter bottle. You can get bottles that are up to a liter in size. As for versatility, well, indeed, it is a staple in many classic cocktails, having such a long history. It has been in some of the most classic concoctions to date, and is still used today in original and creative ways. But as you can see I'm doing right now, you can drink it neat, and it isn't unpleasant. It is quite nice to drink it like this, or you could drink it with soda water. These are all possibilities, which just goes to show the level of versatility of this beverage. Similarly, in using it for different occasions, this is something that can be drunk casually thanks to its low price point, but then will fit perfectly into a lavish black tie affair. It can be drunk almost anywhere without it seeming either too ostentatious, too much, or even maybe too casual. And next, that leads me on to the value for money. So in the USA, a 75-litre bottle will cost you about $19, give or take. In France, I paid, well, not for this, I would have paid if I got a 75 centiliter bottle, only around $8, $9, something like that. Indeed, it is very cheap. It's about the same price as, well, in Europe, a relatively decent Burgundy red. You're not looking at anything that's too expensive. Anyway, finally, let's talk about the cocktails and pairings. This is just a consideration we have in the bottom right-hand corner of the liquor formula when there's enough ink in the printer. This is not scored. This is just something that we have as a thought exercise. So, of course, cocktails. The Martini Rosso is basically synonymous with the Negroni. And although some people argue that you could use a better quality vermouth, it's still a staple in there. It works very, very well. While it might be not quite as complex, it does offer you the necessary sweetness to contrast against the Campari. It doesn't interfere with gin either, when the juniper of the gin and the botanicals of the vermouth seem to express themselves individually without contrasting too much. You can also use it in a Manhattan. And then, of course, another Campari vermouth classic is the Americano. And I could go on forever because there are so many ways that you could drink this. Personally, though, I quite like drinking it neat as an aperitif. And that leads me on to the food pairings. Indeed, antipasti is one of the best ways that you could enjoy the Martini Rosso if you're going to have it during a meal. You could have it with, for example, prosciutto and melon with a drizzle of Modena vinegar. You could have it with some tomatoes stuffed with mozzarella. There are lots of different ways. Aubergine caviar. It's a great drink, refreshing, aromatized wine to have with a starter. Otherwise, I also noted down, it's hard to read here because I'm running out of ink, but it's ice cream. Indeed, you could have this as a dessert rather than doing a starter. You could have it alongside perhaps a fruit sorbet or even with vanilla ice cream. Those are going to complement their flavors quite well, add some sweetness to the vermouth, take the edge off the bitterness. And finally, in terms of cigars, because at Bespoke Unit, we're very fond of cigars, consider something like the Oliva Connecticut. While Connecticut cigars tend to have a very creamy mouthfeel, this one's much more subdued. It's going to have a greater expression of nuttiness, and of course that also being a good food pairing. I didn't mention it, but you could have nuts and bowlful or pistachio nuts. That would be very good. But this is a great cigar to have alongside it. Try to avoid anything that's going to be too full in personality. A heavy-bodied cigar is going to just crush the flavor of the vermouth. Meanwhile, something that's too mild and too creamy, so an Ecuadorian Connecticut or even a Connecticut cigar that uses broadleaf may struggle to compete with some of the expressiveness of Martini Rosso. Although there are more premium vermouths on the market, such as Dolin, Cinzano and Carpano Antica, Martini still holds its own, and indeed it's proven itself. It's one of the most popular, if not the most popular, vermouths on the market. You'd be hard-pressed to go to a bar where it doesn't serve this. It's easy to drink on its own. It goes well into any cocktails. Although it's not going to be the best vermouth, it's still very good. Anyway, that's all from me today. If you have any questions, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you think of Martini Rosso if you've tried it yourself. Otherwise, give us a like, a subscribe, and as I said, a couple of comments would be great. And until next time, why don't you head to bespokeunit.com and see all the other lifestyle subjects that we cover. If you head to bespokeunit.com/spirits or indeed /wine, you'll see all the resources that we have purporting to liquor.